All right,
Awesome.
amazing. Over
Thank you
to
so
you.
much, Sonia. All right, let me just very quickly share my screen. Let me know once you guys can see it. Can you see my screen? All right,
Yes.
perfect. Welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. So glad for you guys to be here today. We're going to spend the next 90 minutes or so talking a little bit about storytelling, especially in the context of venture growth. But before we get started, just something I want to put it out there. And of course, you can't start a workshop without a meme, especially Drake. Just wanted to let you know that webinars are extremely boring. It's actually a waste of everyone's time. And all of you are running businesses. I do not want this to become a session which you could have just seen the recording of. Like why come to a live session in the first place in 2024? You can watch stuff on YouTube at 2x speed and save time, right? You don't need to actually show up for a live session. What I really believe in instead of webinars is conversations, because conversations are both ways. It's not just going to be me talking and you guys listening. I want this to be literally a conversation where I am speaking to you all, but you also get the chance to ask me questions, share your thoughts, share your opinions. So there's going to be a lot of conversation. As you already saw, I hate webinars. Being a full-time business owner myself, I think webinars are extremely boring and I think it's a waste of everyone's time. So it's going to be a conversation. Quick request is if you guys can, uh, feel free to switch on your cameras. I'm going to keep my camera on throughout. We're going to be talking a lot. It's good to see faces. We are all joining in remotely from different parts. I am currently joining in from India, but I do a lot of work in Africa. So I am no stranger to everything in the continent, which I will share with you guys in a bit. Um, and at the same time, please do not wait for the end to ask me questions. If you have a question at any point of time, if you want to share something with everyone, you have a different opinion, you disagree with me, that is allowed as well. You have a better joke than mine that I can steal, please feel free to share at any point of time. Don't wait till the end. Before I move forward, quick question: Is my audio all right? Are you able to hear me? Okay. Should I talk slower, faster? Is this all right for everyone? Yes? Okay, perfect. All right, guys. Welcome. Now, having said that, what I really believe in, and this is just a central philosophy that I live my life based on. It's not just something I cooked up, for this particular session. Is that the shortest distance between two people, any two people anywhere in the world is always a story, right? And it doesn't matter who the two people are. It could be between you as an entrepreneur and your customer. It could be between you as a product designer and user of your product, between you as a founder and let's say investors you're pitching to. It doesn't matter who the two people are. The shortest distance between anybody, anywhere in the world is always a story. What I mean by this is that if you are doing business in 2024 and if you want to build a user base, a customer base, you want to build a community around your product or service, it's not just enough for you to be good entrepreneurs or engineers or product designers. You also have to be good storytellers, right? And when I say good storytellers, I don't mean people who are good at language skills. I mean people who are able to create authentic narratives that other people can relate with, right? That's very important because even before your users or customers make up their mind to use your product or service, they are going to relate with your narrative, with your story first, and then they make up their mind whether to engage in a business with you or not. That's how all of us operate. All of the brands we love, all of the companies that we look up to, founders that we look up to, everything that we believe about the world around us is shaped by stories and narratives. It's the stories we tell each other, the stories we believe in, that carries forward to entrepreneurship as well. And unfortunately, it's just something that is not given as much importance, especially if you're a first-time entrepreneur, because we are also focused on, just things like our business model, our product strategy, all of that stuff that we often forget to understand that we need to also have the skill of being a good storyteller, which is being able to take all of your data but convert that into a narrative that is able to grab people's attention, provide agency, and really inspire them to take action. So we're going to be talking a lot about how do we do this. But since I'm talking about stories, you also deserve to know who I am, what I do, and what kind of background I come from. My name is Rohan. I have been an entrepreneur all my life. I started my first company when I was 19 years old. So I've gone through the whole process of starting a company, raising investment, having a team. I did all of that while I was still in college. By the way, also there's going to be a lot of background noise, unfortunately, today in this session because it is the Indian festival of Diwali. If you guys know, it's like Indian Christmas, right? So there's going to be sounds of firecrackers. It's evening here. So I apologies in case it gets a little too much, but I just want to let you know that you may hear fireworks in the background. Do not be alarmed. It's just a festival time right now. Okay. Back to what I was talking about. So I've basically been building companies, product services all my life. I started my first company at 19, but I also failed at my first startup by the time I got 22. Of course, I've built successful companies after that, but I saw early success and early failure, which taught me a lot of lessons. In fact, everything that I will be sharing with you guys in this session is based on actual experience, right? It's just stuff that I wish someone had told me when I was starting my first startup because I had no idea about a few things that I learned the extremely hard way. Um, I currently own and run two companies. I am also the CTO of an AI product company in the US. I've worked with some of the biggest brands in the world, multiple different countries. And of course, as you can see in the background, that Sonia pointed out earlier, I love music. I play the guitar, I play the keyboards. So yeah, happy to give you recommendations around that stuff as well. Not going to spend too much time here, but you can scan this if you want to find out more about my work or just know who I am, where I'm based. Now, when I say that I've been an entrepreneur and I've been building products and services, I wanted to give you like a quick tour of what kind of projects have I been involved in. So everything that I will be sharing with you guys in this session has, for example, been used to, I've been working with partners around the world to build sustainable communities and businesses using something called human-centered design. And I'm going to be making some references to HCD a lot in this session. But the kind of projects I've been involved in, for example, I have been, me and my team, we have been working on public health projects around Africa. So this is an example of a project where we built a malaria rapid diagnosis and response system, which ended up becoming a social venture funded by MasterCard Foundation in Mozambique in the year 2017. So that's our team on the ground in Mozambique and also in New York, where we built a healthcare app and a system that trained doctors and healthcare professionals in order to solve the problem of high mortality rate due to malaria in a specific region in Mozambique, right? I've also been involved in projects, for example, in Kenya. So that is me in Kenya in 2019, where we are literally making agriculture cool. So what we kind of found is that there is, and I know that some of you here are from agri-tech companies, but just a trend that we've been noticing around the world is that there's very little innovation and just investments flowing into the agri-tech space because agriculture is not really considered to be cool. Most of the youth in most places in the world, youth working in innovation, agriculture is typically the last domain that they think of, really spending their time in. But there is so much to solve for in agriculture that it is often looked down upon. Let me ask a quick question to you guys, if you know. Does anybody here know how much water is required for a single cup of, let's say, a cappuccino that you have in the morning, a single cup of coffee? Do you have any guesses on how much water is required for a single cup of coffee, from the time the beans are in the field right down to the time you actually hold it in your hand and you take your first sip? Any guesses how much water is required for a single cup of coffee? Coffee with milk, so a cappuccino. Any guesses? Juliet, I see you saying something. You're on mute.
Well, I was saying it must be a lot of water. I was thinking about it more making the cappuccino. I love coffee.
Uh-huh.
So now
Uh-huh.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Okay, that's okay. You think it's a lot of water. Samuel here says 0.5 liters of water. All right. Anyone else? You can unmute yourself. How much water do you think is required in total for a single cup of coffee that you have in the morning? Any guesses, guys? Don't be afraid of being wrong. Just make a guess.
100 liters.
100 liters, Paul. Okay. Fair enough. Anyone else? 0.5 liters, Samuel. 100 liters, Paul. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, let me give you the answer. On average, it takes about 150 liters of water for a single cup of coffee from the time the beans are harvested in the field right down to the time you actually hold that coffee in your hand. All inclusive, the total amount of water in that entire process for a single cup of coffee is on average 150 liters, right? Can you imagine the amount of pressure our food systems are under? And we are just talking about coffee. If I get into some of the other food crops that is regularly on our plate, we are not even prepared for the kind of numbers that's going to come up when you just look at like how intensive it is to really grow these crops and make sure that all of us get a healthy meal. In fact, if we continue growing food in using our current processes, it is impossible to feed everyone in the world beyond the year 2050, right? It's impossible. Even if you turn all of the available land on this planet into agricultural land, you will still not be able to feed everyone on this planet three good healthy meals a day beyond the year 2050. It's impossible because it's just impossible to grow enough food using our current food systems and practices. That's the amount of pressure that our food systems are under. So we decided to do something about it, where we are now bringing in innovations using farmer-owned student-driven models, where we realize that there's a lot of innovations that happens in universities, but people, students don't really want to take up a career in agriculture. So what we are trying to do is outsource the innovation to universities and labs, but make sure that the innovations are owned by farmers so that we can change some of these models and see how we can create new and more efficient methods of growing, some of the most high intensive crops out there in the world. I have also been involved in projects, for example, tracking the spread of the human papilloma virus, HPV. So that is me in South Korea, Philippines, and Vietnam last year, where I traveled across Southeast Asia, tracking the spread of the human papilloma virus, which causes cervical cancer, in order to see how we can design strategies and interventions to stop the spread of HPV, but also to make sure that we can create better care solutions for patients that have cancer on the other side. And of course, I was mentioning this earlier, I've also been in Egypt. That's me in Egypt in 2019, where I was working with a couple of partners designing sustainable living solutions for a refugee settlement in North Africa, right? So all of the tools and all of the lessons that I used for this, I'm going to share it with you. In fact, this particular project very heavily incorporated storytelling for impact practices in order to mobilize a community and bring about change. So that's something I've been doing as well. And of course, here in India, which is where I spend half the year, most of my time, because my family is based in India, is I've also been working with, traditional textile artisans, seeing how we can introduce digital practices into their traditional methods and help them improve their ROI in their business models and, artisanal models and bring about change. So the reason that I do workshops like this or take sessions like this is because there's a lot of lessons that I've learned from working in about 15 countries around the world so far. And I always believe that the problems out there in the world, the problems that you guys are solving, is way bigger than what one organization or one individual can solve. So I just feel that everything that I've learned out there, I want to give it out to as many people as possible, individuals such as yourself, so that you can also learn from it, incorporate them into your businesses, and together we make the world a better place. That's literally the only reason why I do these sessions, because I feel I would have loved to, learn some of the stuff that I've learned working around the world. So those are just some of the countries where I have personally worked on projects in. As I said, multiple continents, multiple countries, picked up a lot. from these cultures, some of the things that I will be sharing with you guys here today. Now, having said that, let's jump right into what we are talking about here today. But I want to just start with a very, very quick, like almost like a 2 minute thought experiment. Does anyone here know about the Stanford $5 challenge? Anyone here? Can you raise your hand? Anyone here knows about the Stanford $5 challenge? Okay, for Emmanuel, by your smile, I guess you know about this. Do you? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so fortunately or unfortunately, I think the person who worked on the dollar challenge is also on the call. I don't know if John is still on the call.
Oh wow. Is the person
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, he was on the call.
Oh, I see. I see. Got it, got it.
Yeah.
Just for everyone else, just a quick thought experiment, right? And I want to see what you guys come up with. So here is something that was run in Stanford University. So there was this professor that divided the class into teams and gave each team $5, right? And told them that you have 2 hours to generate the maximum return on that investment. So basically, you have $5 and 2 hours to convert that $5 into the maximum return on investment possible. And then at the end of 2 hours, every team would get 5 minutes to present to the whole class about what it is that they did and how much ROI they generated and what strategy they used, right? So $5 per team, 2 hours to convert that $5 into the maximum possible ROI. And then you get a 5 minute presentation time to come and present to the whole class what strategy you used, how much money do you have, and how did you make it possible. I want to throw this question back at everyone here. Take a minute if you want to think about it, but I want to hear your ideas. What would you have done? If you were given $5 and you were a part of the Stanford University class and you had 2 hours to convert that $5 into the maximum ROI and then a 5 minute presentation time in front of the whole class, what would you do? Any ideas? Paul, Juliet, Manyasa, what would you have done? There are no wrong answers. Just you can be as creative as possible. The question is, what would you have done if you were leading a team?
Only 2 hours.
Only 2 hours. You have $5, you have 2 hours. You need to convert that $5 into the max. You guys are all founders, right? This is what you do.
In agriculture, one things take a 3 months.
Uh-huh.
But I would think of like buying and selling something which is on high demand. If it's lunchtime, I can
Okay.
like now people are eating this time. I had even a colleague was eating. So if I go
Yes.
buy, use the money to buy some plates of food at a cheaper restaurant, then I move
Right.
around the places. People in the
Perfect.
offices, sometimes they're hungry, but they don't have maybe where to get food. So I can easily look around, can buy it. That's one way, maybe in 2 hours I can get back the money.
Okay.
Another way would be 2 hours is limited. Or
Mhm.
just invest in myself. I eat or teach myself or learn.
Okay. Yeah, that's not enough time to do that, right? Not enough time to acquire skills and then use that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what Paul is saying, and Juliet can go next. So Paul is saying that he would purchase something at a lower cost and sell it at a higher cost, especially a commodity that is in high demand. So if it's lunchtime, maybe figuring out what is a food item at high demand and sell that for a higher price. Some of the other ideas Paul was playing with is knowledge based. So maybe teaching something, having 2 hours, charging money for it could be another way to convert that $5 into something higher. Yes, Juliet.
No, I would take the same direction Paul has taken. I'd buy water.
Okay.
I'd go buy a carton of water And because you buy it for literally, it's a very small amount of money. Like in Uganda, it would go for, let's say, wholesale like 500 shillings, but water retails at 1,000 shillings. So definitely just
Right.
be getting 100% of
Right.
profit for each bottle of water. I'll just get a carton of water and come and resell to all my workmates in the office, and I would have maximum return on my $5.
Perfect. All right. So Juliet says that, of course, water is something that has always been in demand. So she's going to make her bets on waters, buy it for cheaper, sell it at a higher price. All right, Munyasa.
So
You have
what
to
I
mute, yeah.
would do with the $5, so I would definitely go in for places like restaurants downtown. Like for me, I've worked like downtown in places where there's so many business people work from down there. So I would
Right.
definitely go in for stuff like lemonade or juice. So these people eat food, but most of them do not have drinks. So juice
Right.
or lemonade is so easy to, to make, and it doesn't require you a lot of money. So I would in Ugandan shillings, I would, sell to each person maybe 1,000 shillings,
Right.
or if someone can pay me $1, so I would quickly get out it, bring in, because I mean, food or drinks is something someone takes in quickly and, on a daily
Right.
basis. So I would
Sure.
go in for something like that. I don't know. I'm sure it would give me some money.
Absolutely. So having a juice or a lemonade stall, something around those lines, fair, Munyasa. By the way, anyone else has a strategy which is very different from what Juliet, Paul, and Munyasa is talking about? Do you have any ideas? Challenge statement is right in front of you. Do you have an idea or a strategy which you feel would generate more money compared to Munyasa, Juliet, and Paul's strategy, which is all dependent on purchasing something for a lower price and selling it at a higher price? Or creating a commodity like a lemonade using other commodities? Anyone else has a different strategy? What would you do if you were given this challenge statement? Sachin, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking more of going to the street, go with the mic and start preaching. I think that is the biggest thing which can earn money in Uganda
Right.
actually.
Fair, 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 fair.
uh,
Sachin is talking about how religion is
you
always in
preach
demand,
something,
even if
so you don't only use money.
sorry, Sachin, I think your voice is breaking up. You're stuck as well. All right, so I think we have the basic idea what Sachin was saying, which is use religion, go in the street, start preaching. Religion is always in demand. I think you'll make some money out of it. All right, let me show you what happened in this particular class, right? And of course, I'll talk about why am I starting with this in a session that's about storytelling for venture growth. Now, if you look at the challenge statement, of course, you have $5, you have 2 hours, and then a 5-minute presentation time. What some of the teams in the class did is that they looked at $5 as an asset, right? Which is what most of you guys were doing here right now, Paul, Munyasa, and Juliet especially, and leverage the $5, right? Which is, either buying something for cheap and selling it for more, betting on black, stuff like that. Others, for example, what Sachin spoke about, looked at $5 as a distraction, right? And they completely bypassed it. So they did stuff like pumping bike tires for $1. Someone booked and resold restaurant reservations, or like Sachin said, preaching in the streets and getting money for it. So most teams, just like most of you here right now, focused on $5 as either an asset which needs to be leveraged or as a distraction which needs to be bypassed. And both of these sets of teams made on average about $100. They were able to convert the $5 into $100 in the 2 hours time that they had. But the winning team used a very different strategy, right? You know what those guys did? They realized when they look at this challenge statement that there's $5 and there's 2 hours, of course, but then there's something else that nobody else was focusing on, which was the 5-minute presentation time that they would get in front of the whole class, right? So what the winning team did is that they realized that that 5 minute presentation time to a bunch of Stanford students is actually the asset. So they sold their 5 minute presentation time to a local company that wanted to recruit college students, right? And they sold it for about $650. And now this company had direct access to Stanford students, like university students that they were hoping to recruit. So they were very happy to pay for that 5 minutes time. And of course, they didn't even use the original $5. And the winning team's ROI was about 12,000%, right? Why is this a thought experiment that I wanted to begin with? While all of us here are sitting, and I've had the chance to, look at your profiles as well, we're all sitting here in the age of AI, right? And we're talking about storytelling, we're talking about narratives, and we're talking about venture growth, and we're talking about different strategies to help us achieve this. Right now, out there in the market, just like the Stanford $5 experiment, there is actually a new opportunity, which is AI, right? Or a challenge. And literally, the challenge statement that almost every founder right now is thinking about is how can we as a company use AI to increase our ROI? Right? That's what everyone is thinking about. And there are two sets of companies again. There's one set of company that is looking at AI as an asset and they're leveraging it, right? Where they're using AI into their DevOps processes, they're using AI into their business processes, or they are, for example, launching an AI product for their customers. Whereas some other companies are beginning to look at AI as either a distraction or a threat, and they're basically developing strategies to bypass AI, right? When they're talking about like how AI is no longer relevant to the business that we're doing. But what is very important to understand, and I'm telling you this as the CTO of an AI company, which is at the end of the day, the most valuable asset or opportunity is always, always with customers and how their needs are evolving in the year 2024. It's not going to be about AI. It's never going to be about the technology that you're using because most of our customers don't care about it. Let me ask a quick question to demonstrate this. Does anyone how many of you come from technical backgrounds? Like, how many of you here know how to code? Anyone? Anyone here comes from a technical background? You know how to code? Paul, you do? Okay. Anatoly, you do as well. Anyone else here comes from a technical background?
Yes, I do.
You do, Samuel? All right. Question for people that come from just a technical background. Does anybody, or just a question in general for everyone else, does anybody here know about what technology Netflix uses in their backend for showing you the kind of entertainment that they do? Anyone here knows about the technology that Netflix uses in their backend? Anyone? Munyasa, do you know about what tech Netflix used when you watched Blacklist on Netflix and enjoyed it so much?
Actually, I do not use Netflix.
You
So
don't use Netflix?
we support a friend of ours who sells movies. He downloads at once and then
Oh,
we
wow.
support him to buy from him.
Do you know what tech the app uses that your friend used to give you the content?
No.
No? All right, let me frame this question in another way. Think of the top 5 apps in Uganda right now. Top 5 apps that everyone in Uganda knows about and uses, which is on your phones at this time. Do you guys know about what tech they use in the backend for their services? Anyone? Okay, here's the point I'm trying to make. You don't know that. You don't know what tech they use. I also don't know what tech Netflix uses. And the point is, I don't care. Why would I care? As a customer, I don't care if Netflix uses AI or if Paul is literally sitting there and like showing us the movie recommendations by hand. I don't care as a customer. It means nothing to me, right? As a customer, it is absolutely irrelevant what technology Uber is using. All I care about is when I step out of the airport, I want to find a cab within 5 minutes. That's all I care about. I don't care how Uber makes it possible, right? As a customer, what I care about is my problem being solved. I care about things like if it's raining outside the airport, is the pickup spot for Uber in a place where there is a shade so that I don't get wet in the rain. That's what I care about. That has nothing to do with the Uber app, but it has something to do with the Uber experience, right? So what I'm trying to say is that as customers, nobody cares about the technology that you're using. Nobody cares about how you're offering your product or service, because customers care about having their problem solved. But as founders, or if you were a part of Netflix's team, or if you were a part of the team that creates and maintains the Uber application, it is important for you to know about the technology and the backend infrastructure because it is relevant to you, but it's not relevant to customers. So what I'm trying to say is, I find a lot of founders, entrepreneurs out there in the world that tend to use terms like we are an AI powered, a product company, or we offer an AI powered solution for helping farmers get access to a low interest, low collateral loans. The point is, farmers do not care about AI. Your investors maybe care about AI. Maybe your peers in the entrepreneurship ecosystem care about AI, but your customers don't. So it's very, very important for you to understand that when you're talking about business strategies, when you're talking about venture growth, and when you're talking about storytelling from your users' perspective, technology and things like AI is not really the opportunity or the asset because that's irrelevant to your customers. What really matters is how you're solving their problem and whether or not you're able to understand that the problem that they're solving and address it in the most efficient way. That's what people care about, right? So I just wanted to start with this. Um, since we're talking about storytelling, storytelling for impact is different from other forms of storytelling because when we talk about storytelling for impact, the objective is to inspire a community into action. So this could be a community of users, for example, who use your product in the beta stage. This could be a community of customers that purchase your product or service. This could be a community of existing customers that share and talk about your product or service on social media. But the purpose, the objective of storytelling for impact is it always involves a community and it always involves a call to action, right? So you inspire a community to actually act upon a call to action. That's storytelling for impact, which is different from other forms of storytelling. For example, we started out the session by talking about your favorite books or your films or your TV shows. Those are also methods of storytelling, but then they do not have a call to action to it. The author of a book does not expect you to do anything after you read the book, right? But storytelling for impact is very different because it is measurable. You're trying to achieve a very well-defined objective, and the objective always involves a community and it involves a call to action. Now, before we get into storytelling and understand some of the strategies that you can use, while you're building narratives for your products or companies, it's just important to understand that your audience, and it doesn't matter who the audience is, okay? It could be customers, it could be users, it could also be investors. They will not empathize with your solution first. They will always empathize with the problem that you're trying to solve, right? So always begin with the problem you're addressing and not with your solution. Why, by the way? Because the problems that you guys are solving have existed long before you came up with a technology solution to address it, right? So your solution is new, but the problem has existed for, maybe years, and there may have been different solutions to address it, but people always empathize with problems before they understand your solution. So it's very important that your definition of the problem that you're solving and your understanding of the problem that you're solving is on point, or you will end up creating a storytelling narrative that nobody understands, right? Because people may or may not understand your solution, your technology, but everybody empathizes with problems. That's number one. Something else that you have to really ask yourself is how well do you understand the problem that you're solving? And this sounds almost like common sense. If we are founders and entrepreneurs, I am a full-time entrepreneur myself. It almost sounds common sense that we will know what problem we are solving, right? This is not something to be discussed, but I'm going to show you using an example how sometimes our understanding of the problem is also not really accurate, where we end up talking about it in a way which maybe disenfranchises a community that could be able to sort of relate with what you're solving, right? So it's very important to go back and ask this question: do you understand the problem that you're solving? And of course, you have to go back and ask yourself, how well do you understand your primary stakeholders? Because if you do not understand the community that you want to inspire with your call to action, there is no way your storytelling campaign or narrative is going to work. When I say storytelling campaigns or narratives, by the way, marketing and advertising is one application of storytelling, but this also extends to other things like creating a pitch deck, creating a video that inspires people to sign up on your platform. It could even boil down to what is the information strategy for your website or landing page. They are all applications of storytelling, right? A crowdfunding campaign, that is also an application of storytelling. So I'm not just talking about marketing or advertising here. I'm just talking about using narratives to inspire a community for a specific call to action. Right? Make sense? You guys with me so far? All right, perfect. So if you guys understand this, I want to very quickly, and this is just a very popular case study, and it's one of my favorites that I use a lot. But I want to not take too much time. Very quickly, I want to show you an example of how sometimes our understanding of a problem is
Hey,
not
Rohan.
really accurate. Yes, Emmanuel.
Yeah, I'm seeing a hand from Anatoly. I don't know if he has a question. Oh,
Anatoly, do you have a question, or is your hand raised from the time I asked if you are a tech founder? Yes.
oh,
Sorry, put it down last time. Sorry.
Cool, no problem, Anatoly. All right, perfect. Now, I want to very quickly show you guys something, which is, you guys have heard about product market fit, right? Everyone here? Yeah. Can someone very quickly give me the definition of, like, what is your personal understanding of product market fit? How do you define product market fit or service market fit? What is your personal understanding of product market fit as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think for me, product market fit means a strong demand for your product, and maybe you're able to have user retentions. You're also getting things like referrals. You have positive feedback, and most importantly, you're seeing a lot of growth in your revenue growth, basically. That's what I would term as market fit.
Got it. Anatoly, good to see you. So Anatoly says that product market fit, according to him, is when you're getting a lot of positive feedback for customers using your product. You're seeing positive revenue growth. Those are pretty important markers of product market fit. Fair? Anyone else? What is your understanding of product market fit? Anyone else wants to try? I'm just curious. I'm not looking for a right answer here.
Okay, just for curiosity.
Yeah.
For me, the way I see on the product market fit is at that moment where the solution you're providing solves the problem, a specific problem of the person you're serving,
Right.
and the problem is actually solved in a simple way. It shouldn't be complex. But then also, as you solve it, on my side, I believe it should be profitable on the unit level. But since you are not only going to serve one person, you should be able to serve even many others. So you should be able to serve even many other people in that category who are having the same problem, also in a simple way, or replicable way, or scalable way. Thank you.
Got it. Perfect. So Paul is focusing, his understanding of product market fit focuses a lot on the problem that you're solving, who you're solving it for. But of course, if your product is also able to benefit other people over the long run, which is going to lead to your product being able to scale and grow as a company, right? Fair enough. Julian, did you want to say something? Yes.
No, I think product market fit is, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, how relevant is your product for the market, and does the market actually have use for the product that you're putting there?
Right.
Will it be beneficial to them? Will it really work? And also on the other side, does it make sense for you as a business to have the product out on the market?
Right.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
my
fair.
understanding.
That's fair, Juliet. Munyasa, I saw your hand raised as well.
Yeah, and also to add on to what my colleagues have said, to me, I think it's when you align the product with the needs of the people you would want to serve. Like, for example, me, like, I was already in the textile business, and I knew how the product I'm making, the sewing threads from plastic bottles. So like, I knew very well that 60% of my revenue is coming from these sewing threads. So I knew how much people really wanted them, and they wanted them so badly. Like, they wanted, they want these threads to be delivered right on time. And they come from China. They have to wait for between 2 to 4 months. So I understood that there is this need, so that I have to create this product and be able to give my customers this product on time. And they were having literally, like, you're syncing the problem with what you want to give your people. So that's what I think.
Got it. Thank you so much, Munyas, and thank you for illustrating that using an actual personal experience. So here is basically what all of us are saying in different ways, right? And which is my understanding of product market fit as well, is that, so when it comes to product market, there are two things we are talking about, right? We're talking about the supply side and the demand side, right? So the demand side is basically the customers, their needs, their wants, all of that stuff. And then on the supply side is just things like your value propositions, the solution that you're building, and so on and so forth. The first thing to understand about product market fit is that product market fit is achieved when your understanding of the supply side and your understanding of the demand side perfectly match each other, right? Which means you perfectly understand your customers, who they are, what are their needs, what problem you're solving. And then you're able to create a solution whose value propositions match the demand side, right? They are able to solve the problem in the intended way. And of course, for the two sides to come together, you need to really understand these two questions that you see on the slide in front of you, right? If you do not understand the problem that you're solving well, and if you do not understand your primary stakeholders, your users or your customers, there's absolutely no way you can achieve product market fit. The glue that brings your understanding of demand side and supply side together is actually storytelling. There is absolutely no way your users or your customers will ever find out about your product or service, or they will ever want to use your product or service if your narrative is not correct, right? So what I mean to say is, if you spend a lot of time on the supply side, if you spend a lot of time optimizing the technology for your solution, but if you do not understand the problem that you're addressing properly, you will end up creating a narrative that does not speak to the customers, and therefore they will end up not using your product or service. Similarly, if your understanding of the problem is great, but if you end up building a solution which does not fit that problem, you again run the risk of people not being able to use your product or service. But interestingly, if your understanding of the problem is great, if the solution that you're building is great, but you still do not have the right glue, which means you do not have the right storytelling or narrative principles in place, people still may not relate with what you're building and not end up using your product or service, right? So it's actually storytelling or the narrative, which is ultimately the glue that brings those two sides together and helps you achieve product market fit. But very importantly, something to remember is that product market fit is not just something you achieve, it is something you achieve and maintain. So what I mean to say is, if you achieved product market fit in 2019, there is no guarantee that you still have product market fit in the year 2024, because the supply side and the demand side tends to change constantly, right? So the problem or your understanding of the problem as it was in the year 2019 for your customers, the problem itself might evolve in the year 2024, right? Maybe your customers do not look at the problem the same way, or maybe there have been other factors that have affected that exact same problem. So you need to constantly go back to the drawing board. And this is an activity I also perform with my team almost every year, where we go back to the drawing board and we try to see that is our understanding of the problem that we are solving, is our understanding of our customers, and is our understanding of the solution we are building and the underlying technology and so on and so forth, do they still match? Because product market fit is not something you achieve once in your life and you sit back and relax for the rest of your journey as an entrepreneur. Product market fit is something you achieve but it is also something you need to constantly maintain, right? So it's always a good practice to go back to the drawing board and answer the two questions that you see here, because only then will you still have a narrative that people relate with, and that actually speaks to people and inspires them to take action. And the action could be anything from signing up on your website to purchasing a product or service to sharing your new campaign video on social media, right? So it's very important for you to keep going back and doing this. Now, having said that, I want to show you like just how complex it is sometimes for you to really understand problems. Because if you don't do that well, you are going to mess up the first step of storytelling. So let me very quickly, I'm not going to take too much time for this exercise. I usually do this for much, much longer. But very, very quickly, let me ask you guys this question, right? By the way, does anyone know what I'm about to talk about here? Women carrying water in buckets, the Zambia case study. Anybody? Anybody here? All right, perfect. That's okay. Now, this picture that you see in front of you, I'm going to give you some context behind the picture, and then I'm going to ask you guys a question to see what you think about it, okay? So the women in this picture, they represent women from a village in Zambia. For the sake of this conversation, let's say that these women belong to a village in Zambia. The reason that they're all carrying buckets on their heads is because the only source of water for these women in the village is a river which is situated a couple of miles away from the village. So these women need to walk all the way to the river, carry water in buckets, and then they walk all the way back to the village every single day, right? So it's an activity that they perform every day. It's an activity that takes a couple of hours. And also, it's an activity which is very difficult because these buckets are heavy, the women carry it on their heads, and they walk every single day. And there's no other source of water in the village where they stay, right? Now, just a little bit more information is that the weather conditions are usually extremely hot, extremely dry, right? It's very hot and dry out there. When the women perform this activity, and it's just overall an issue that they live with every single day. And this picture represents women during one such journey. Got it, everyone? Any questions? Yeah, the context is clear. All right. First question for everyone here is that, do you guys agree that this picture represents a problem worth solving for? Yeah. Lack of access to water. I hope all of you agree with that this is a problem. Okay, perfect.
It
Now, you
depends on
guys
the
are working on
context.
this. Sorry, Paul.
That in my thought, it depends on the context. I've ever seen some initiative where they asked women fetching water from the wells.
Right.
And there was these innovators trying to solve that fetching of the water. But then the
Correct.
women were like, but it's an opportunity for us to talk with our other fellow women. So we love
Correct.
it.
Perfect. Sure. So it depends on the context, obviously. And Paul, thank you for sharing that. But within the context of what is happening here, just in general, there is a problem of lack of access to water, right? Which means that the water source is too far. Of course, there's going to be social dynamics involved here, but just the water source is too far for the women to do this activity every single day, right? Fair. Now, the question that I want to ask you guys is, do you have any personal observations, conclusions, just feelings looking at this picture and thinking about that insight, thinking about that context that I just gave you? Like, is there anything interesting you notice in the picture? Any observation you have? Any feelings? Like, do you notice something that makes you think about, something that may be going on? Just your personal observations, feelings looking at this picture. No wrong answers, just what you notice, or what do you observe, or what do you feel based on the context looking at the picture? Yes, Paul.
What I feel like the women carrying water is very tiresome, which is labor intensive. I know they are looking like professionals with the smiles, but I don't know whether it's something good under a condition. Then another thing behind it, I saw much, but as if she's a girl. So it's a wonder, is it time to go to school that she didn't even go to school and she has missed out on education? Then also seeing the woman, I don't see any carrying a baby, yet they seem like to be having a baby. So where are the babies? So it's also on the child growth. Maybe there is also challenge there because they have to fetch the water now. They're not even able to take care of the babies. Thank you.
Got it. So Paul, very empathetic, and then I'll move on to Robert and Munyasa. So Paul says that they look like professionals. Of course, some of them are smiling. We don't know whether they're smiling because the photographer asked them to say cheese, or whether they're really enjoying it and they are professionals at this. We don't know that. But yes, there are women. Paul also spoke about the girl at the back there, and Paul said that maybe it reflects on the fact that there is also a problem of lack of education. Maybe she's not getting education. She also spoke about, do these women have children? If yes, what's happening to the children? Do they carry it on those trips and so on? But Paul, very interesting. I want to pause for a moment on what you said regarding the girl out there in the background. Um, Paul said that maybe the fact that she looks a little younger in age means that she's not going to school, or she doesn't have education. But it's pretty interesting, right? If you think about it, because unless Paul, you know her personally, which you may, but unless you know her personally, it also might be possible where there is a fixed time for people, for women to do this activity, right? So maybe she does go to school later on, or maybe she goes to school first and then performs this activity for a few hours in a day. We have absolutely no way of knowing that for sure, but it's just an assumption for now, right, Paul? Unless you know her personally, of course, then it's a whole different thing. All right, cool stuff. All right, Munyasa, and then we'll go with Robert.
So, if I would just talk about what I think about the picture.
Right.
So I see these young women
Right.
who are so happy about everything. They are literally like comfortable,
Right.
fetching water in baskets. They
Right.
like, their faces are telling me we are really comfortable. And
Okay.
and at the same time, there is, an opportunity, like if they could think about maybe boreholes nearby, or like there
Right.
is an opportunity, but literally no one is, they're just laid back and just comfortable about what's going on. So for
Right.
me, if I would see that there is an opportunity, but no one is literally like taking it. They're so much comfortable with fetching water from far and everything.
Yeah.
Maybe there are no
Okay.
resources, but it's like, just like how someone asked me, like I was in a pitch competition and they were asking me, why isn't there anyone, manufacturing sewing threads in Uganda? Why is it literally, everyone else is getting them from China? And I was like, one of the replies I told them is that, so many, entrepreneurs are not as resilient as me. We are different people. And also the textile traders we are having here, they seem so comfortable. I bring my threads from China, I sell them, people buy them, then that's
Right.
it. That's the end game. For me, I have no problem. So, I mean, I wouldn't go for, manufacturing, but then
Right.
at the back of your head, you don't even know how much opportunities you could be unlocking doing it.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's what I think.
Thank you for sharing that, Munyasa. So very interesting. Munyasa, of course, gave her personal experience with her business, but at the same time, she said something very interesting, which is it looks like there's an opportunity for having things like bore wells here, like tapping into groundwater, but it looks like there are opportunities, but it kind of feels like the women are also very happy. They look very comfortable because of their smiles, doing this particular activity. I find that very interesting, and I would be very curious to know if there's anyone who disagrees with Munyasa and Paul, that very feel that maybe this is not comfortable, maybe they are not happy doing this, maybe there's something more going on, and there are some clues in the picture or in the context that you can think about. So if anyone wants to counter Paul and Munyasa, I would be very happy. Juliet, I see your hand. Robert, let's go with you first, and then we'll do Juliet. Yes, Robert. Robert, you're on mute.
Let me speak for Robert. So, good afternoon once again. So, when I see these women, the opportunity I see is because most of them have no shoes. So, I would think there would be an opportunity if I would have them put on the shoes. That's the opportunity I see.
Okay. Okay. So shoes is the opportunity that you see. Very interesting, Isaac. That make it easier for them to walk on. Fair enough. Okay. Okay. Julia, you wanted to say something?
Yes, two things actually. I think the look on their faces, yes, they look very happy and smiling. And for me, that comes from a place whereby it is the only life that they know. It is what they know. It is what they have been accustomed to. They were born in that village. They've grown at time. Then they've seen generations of women come. Maybe they saw their grandmothers, their mothers, their aunties, everybody. This is the way of life for them.
Right.
So there's nothing else that they know, and that's like quite normal, and that's why they seem very comfortable, because they do not know anything else. And also what I'm seeing here is they're carrying water in buckets. I wonder how much water gets to the destination. You know how buckets move, it keeps moving. I'm sure a lot of water spills along the way. It's hot, it evaporates, it probably gets contaminated. So I think
Sure.
there's an opportunity for also getting more sustainable stuff to use to fetch water other than the buckets, because you can see the different, there is a bucket that seems to be reused from maybe paint or something. The little girl at the back seems to be carrying a basin. This one is carrying something that's a bit metallic. The other one is carrying something. So yeah, that's what I see.
Fair enough. All right. So Juliet is talking about the fact that maybe the smiles are representative of the fact that this is literally a part of their lives. They have no choice. So they are just accustomed to it. Maybe it doesn't reflect happiness. It just reflects, no other option other than to do this activity. They're carrying water in buckets. Some water will be lost due to evaporation, spillage, all of that stuff. They're also repurposing. For example, we can see some recycled bucket. One of the women is carrying it. So a lot of conversation around that. And overall, what Juliet is saying is slightly different from what Muniasa and Paul said. All right, in the interest of time, Samuel and Anatoly, I know you have your hands up. Let me sort of summarize some of the observations you could have made. And Samuel, Anatoly, and everyone else, you can mentally, tick them off your mind if you notice them as well. So first of all, something that nobody spoke about, which I find very interesting, is that there are only women in the picture, right? There are no men. Which very few people comment on, even though it's right in front of you, because, and I always find it very interesting, no matter where I show this case study in the world, is because it's almost like an underlying assumption where we feel that in every country in the world, this activity is always performed by women, right? But that's not some universal law. Like, who came up with that? Right? But the fact that there are only women in this picture is maybe indicative about the fact that there is a gender-based division of labor, right? Which means that some activities are performed by men, some activities are performed by women. And it kind of feels like this particular activity is done by women only, which is very interesting because I mentioned that this case study is from Zambia and not Uganda. So a new country, new culture, new community, but it looks like this activity is performed by women in that location as well. Now, the women are doing this as a group, which means it looks like it's a group activity, which means that there is going to be fixed times and some coordination involved when they go out to get water. They're not just going to walk out of the house whenever they feel like. It looks like they do this together as a group. So they are going to coordinate with each other, figure out what is the best time to go around and do this. The women are all carrying water in buckets. Some of them are not using their hands to balance it, which is indicative of the fact that they are used to doing this for quite some time. They have the habit of performing this activity, which is why they're quite skilled at it. The buckets are open on top, so some water will be lost due to evaporation and spillage. Also, if they perform this activity over long periods of time, they are going to end up developing spine, back, neck, shoulder problems, right? They're going to end up having a lot of body ache and body pain if they do this for quite some time. Also, at the same time, a single bucket looks a very inefficient way of carrying water because what if one woman here represents a family of 7? That's very little water for the whole day if it's one bucket only. So overall, it looks like it's a very inefficient way of carrying water. And of course, some of you mentioned that maybe they do not have shoes, which will make the journey even more difficult. And overall, it just looks like a very uncomfortable way to get water from so far and come back. Of course, they are smiling. We don't know why they are smiling. Is it because of the photographer who looks alien to them? Or maybe the photographer asked them to say cheese, or maybe they've never seen the kind of camera before. We don't know those things, but we do know that they're smiling, right? Now, here is what happened. A couple of social entrepreneurs went to this particular village. They saw this problem and they came up with the most efficient and the most obvious solution to an obvious problem, which is if the water source is far, how about bringing it closer to the village? So I ended up having this tube well system. Munyasa, I remember, spoke about bore wells. So this is what they did. They had a groundwater system where you could now pump groundwater directly. These tube wells were created just outside the home, so they didn't have to walk far anymore. The tube well was right in the village, right? Everyone was trained how to use these tube wells, right? So everyone knew how to use them. The tube wells were well designed. The water available was clean, and of course, water was available 24 into 7 into 365. So there was no problem around availability of water, right? Now, here's what happened. When the social entrepreneurs made this, they went back, from the village once they had completed their project, and they came back a few months later to check out how the project was performing. And what they found is when they came back, nobody was using the tube wells. Everyone, all of the women were still walking all the way to the river to carry water in buckets and walking all the way back. Nothing changed, right? The solution was rejected by the community. The tube well was lying right outside their homes in the village. Nobody was using it. The women were still walking all the way to the river, carrying water and coming all the way back, just like they always did. My question to you is, what did we miss? Is there a clue that tells us do not build a tube well? You're not looking at this problem the right way. What happened? What went wrong? Why did the solution not work? Any guesses?
Market fit.
Product market fit was not achieved. Fair. Why? What went wrong? What did
I
we
think
miss?
the problem was the solution provider did not consult the user of the service
Okay.
or the solution before providing it. So they thought of a solution because they saw a problem. So they did
Okay.
not involve the community to understand why they do this before they provide the solution. I think there was a mismatch between the user of the product or the solution and the provider.
Okay, so basically, again, just like Juliet said, ISAC says that the product market fit was not achieved because the solution providers did not consult with the people the solution was designed for, so they missed out on important factors. Fair enough. Anyone else? What happened? What went wrong? Such an efficient and easy and obvious solution to an obvious problem. Why was it rejected? Any other thoughts? Munyasa, this is what you said. What happened? What went wrong? Why did this not work?
Well, I think with communities, now, like, for example, with such a project, they had to sensitize them on the importance of what they had before and what they are going to bring for them. People had to understand the importance than just, putting it there and thinking that they've gotten to know the importance of this. So I feel like they were supposed to, to be sensitized about the importance of what they're going to get in.
Got it. Fair enough. Fair enough. So Munyasa is talking about sensitization. All right. Fair, Samuel, and then we'll go with Julia.
Yeah, I think the problem here is a class problem that happens in communities.
Okay.
I remember we built a digital platform for community leaders to bring money to hospitals so that people can just use mobile money to pay to hospitals, and the community leaders rejected it because they like to collect the money on behalf of the group, then come to the hospital and greet everyone and see the doctor, etc. So the social connection was broken here, and the women don't have a substitute for what to use the time for, because from the picture, what I saw, they are spending a lot of time. I mean, they must be going about 3 times because the water is little. It's about 20 liters or less. So it means they spend basically, but maybe in the morning, in the afternoon. So there isn't a substitute now. What do they use this other time they have on their hands for? So there's another problem here created. You're breaking the social connection, but also you have not given them a substitute for using the time that they have been spending doing this here.
Fair enough. All right. So community leaders not sensitized, and maybe also they were spending their time in certain ways, which was taken away when the tube well was created. Fair enough. Juliet, you had something to share?
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, I think also there was a lapse in communication. The
Right.
parties who came to solve the problem did not communicate with the people they thought were going
Right.
through this problem. So
Got
that
it.
is something that was, and once the communication chain is broken, both parties
Right.
are going to lose out. And then I'll
Right.
just give you a classic example of this. I've seen this happen in my village. I'm from northern Uganda.
Right.
In the community, there are two boreholes like this, and there's a river nearby that's like 5 kilometers away. But I'll tell
Right.
you, that picture is what happens every day. The women will go to
Right.
the river, and for them, the reason is this. One, they say that the water that comes from the borehole is not
Yeah.
fresh water. The river provides
Right.
fresh water. The
Right.
river provides fresh water, which they can actually drink without even having
Right.
to boil it. It's good
Right.
for doing dishes. It's good for washing clothes. So they'll carry the laundry and go wash there. It's also good for bath time. When you take a bath using the river water, it's fresh water. It will just wash off you. You won't get the white cast and everything. And when you use the borehole water that's pumped from underground, it is not
Right.
the same. The same. So there's that. I think also it's just getting the water there, but also what is the quality of the water that you are giving
Right.
with
Right.
the right fit? Will it
Right.
work for what they want? So yeah, I think this is probably what also happened here.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, sharing that, Juliet, as well. So very interesting perspectives. Let me give you the answer about why this did not work, right? And some of the clues are in the answers that you guys came up with. But here is what really went wrong. The clue that tells us why a tube well will not work is the fact that there are only women in this picture, right? Here is what was happening. And I'm sure that you will be able to relate this with what happens in rural Uganda, which is what happens in a lot of other countries, including India, which is where I am right now. What was really going on is that this particular activity was reserved for women. Of course, that's a clue we already saw. But I'm sure this is a site which is also very common in Uganda as well, just like it is very common in Tanzania or in Kenya. What was happening is the village that these women belong to, the societal structure of that particular village, unfortunately, was patriarchal. So, what that means is the women, unfortunately, did not have the liberty of having a social life, right? So they usually stayed indoors because that's how the societal structure was, unfortunately, in that village. This particular activity of carrying water was the only time in the entire day when they were free, when they could leave the men behind, in the homes, and they could really go out and feel that sense of freedom. They could, hang out with their friends, and they could have a social life. They could talk to each other. And this was the only time during the entire day, when they really felt free, because otherwise in the village, the societal structure did not allow them to go out and have a social life or be with their friends. So this particular activity, which seemed like a problem to us, was literally the only activity that the women looked forward to every single day. This was the best part of their entire day, this right here. And by having a tube well that made it easy to get water, it took away the social life, it took away the freedom from the women. So even though this was an efficient solution right outside their homes, it took away that time where they spent time with their friends and they had that social life. And unfortunately, they were not able to accept the solution because they valued that freedom more than the efficiency that the solution provided. So what essentially I'm trying to say is that the solution failed not because it did not address lack of access to water. The solution failed because the designers forgot to consider that there are sometimes related or interconnected problems, to the main problem that you're solving, that may end up breaking your solution and you may not even see it coming. The problem that the designers were trying to solve was lack of access to water, but there was an interconnected problem, which is the societal structure in that particular community did not, unfortunately, give the liberty to women to have a social life, right? It is not a problem that you can solve if you are a company that creates tube wells or a company that creates solutions for lack of access to water. but it is a problem you have to consider if you want to make sure that your product fits the market, right? This is something that's going to happen with all of you, by the way, and this is something that's happened with me as well. It doesn't matter which sector you belong to, it doesn't matter what problem you're solving. There are always going to be these interconnected problems and interconnected factors connected to your main problem that you are addressing as a company, which, if you're not aware of, it will end up causing a bottleneck to the adoption of your solution. So when you build storytelling campaigns and when you build narratives, it is very, very important for you to understand these interconnected problems, right, to the main problem that you're addressing as a company. Because if you do not understand them, you are going to fall short of really understanding the customers you're serving. And therefore, your solution may have the potential of not really being able to fit into the demand, because you did not consider those factors. So the most important and counterintuitive lesson in storytelling is to actually listen before you talk, right? Which is really understand the people you're designing this for, really understand your audience, your stakeholders, look at the problem from their perspective, and then design a solution and then design a campaign that actually speaks to them, right? Which taps into those emotional triggers that they already have. By the way, this is a happy ending story. Does anybody know what the solution was that worked? This solution failed, obviously, right? A tube well or a bore well system. Any guesses what you would have done now that you know this interconnected problem? What would you have designed where the women, you still have to solve the problem of lack of access to water, right? You can't give up. But you also now, there's an interconnected problem of societal structure. How would you solve this problem knowing that? What would you design? Any guesses? How do we solve this? All right, let me give you the answer. It's right here. Right? So you solve it by keeping the journey, but making the journey easier. Right? So the solution was drum rollers, which you can roll on the ground, and shoes. Literally, the solution was drum rollers and shoes. You make the journey easier, right? Why is this such an efficient solution? Because buckets, remember, you had to carry it on your heads. It was so difficult for you. It would lead to long-term health issues, spinal problems. Also, the amount of water you were carrying in the bucket was limited. Buckets were open on top. These drum rollers were 5 times the size of an average bucket. You could roll it on the ground, so there's no health issues related to carrying these at all. Plus, it solves the problem of storage. It solves the problem of spillage. It's just much easier to carry it. You can carry more water, and the journey is easier. You can now spend time with your friends while at the same time, make it a little bit easier to get that water, right? Also, this is a solution that the community needed as well as wanted, because it falls at that sweet spot intersection of product market fit, where the supply and the demand perfectly match each other because it was a solution that worked. By the way, this also created an amazing narrative for the solution, right? Where this was basically a solution now which had the storytelling narrative where you get to have a good time with your friends and enjoy your journey while making it easier to carry water, right? By using the drum rollers, which were called hippo rollers, by the way. The name of this project is hippo rollers. Because the project so beautifully understood the underlying factors and underlying problems for the people that it was being designed for. That is why the solution worked, and that is why the uptake for this particular solution was so high. So what I'm inherently trying to say is, when you're building out your storytelling narratives, and this could be the language that you use on your website, it could be the content for a video that you're putting out there to promote your company. This could be for, let's say, a social media poster. It could also be for an advertising campaign on billboards in Kampala. It doesn't matter what the application of storytelling is, but you really have to understand underlying problems if you want to build a narrative that speaks to people and really gets the job done. While at the same time, this is amazing for venture growth and just from a business strategy perspective as well. Because if you look at this particular case study, it it costs almost a fraction of what it would cost to build a tube well. Building a tube well or a bore well is a very expensive endeavor, but having a drum roller based solution is way cheaper, way more cost effective, and just way more efficient as a solution as a whole. Does that make sense? Yeah, everyone? Perfect. All right. I want to do a very quick time check just so you guys know where we are. I'm going to end this session in exactly 10 minutes. Of course, I'm going to hang out for a few minutes if you want to ask me any question, but in the interest of time, I'm going to end the session in exactly 10 minutes, and I hope that is okay with all of you. Is that all right? Yeah? All right, perfect, perfect. Now, having said that, this looks like a great case study, but what I want to do in the last 10 minutes is I want to show you an example of how do you really apply this particular strategy when you are working on your problems, right? How do you really deconstruct the problems that you are solving as a company so that you're able to find these underlying narratives or these underlying factors that you can use in your storytelling campaign. So I'm going to give you guys two tools in the next 10 minutes. The first tool is going to be a tool for inquiry, and then the next tool is going to be a tool for building your narrative, right? In the most easiest way. So I want to start with this tool for inquiry. There is this framework that is used by investigative journalists, right? And the framework is called story-based inquiry. So when investigative journalists work on a case, usually there are many layers to the case that they are trying to solve, right? And it's very important for them to stay objective and make sure that they're not biased so that they can really find the truth in their stories before they put it out there in the world. And so that people can get the whole perspective of whatever it is that they're reporting on. Now, the way story-based inquiry works is that you deconstruct your problem to find underlying factors. And I want to show you that using an example here. So let's say that you guys were working on a project where you go out there and do some research and you find that you find an insight, from someone out there in the field that says there's so much corruption in the school system that it has destroyed parents' hope that their children will ever lead better lives, right? This is just an insight that you get. So you kind of come to the conclusion that there's a lot of corruption in the school system. Parents are, really, they've given up hope, and their children are, suffering a lot. So maybe you end up designing a system for schools that is transparent, that is able to really give parents more control to look at the learning journey of their students. And overall, you end up designing a solution for this based on this particular insight. But what I'm trying to say is that if you really want to understand the underlying factors, you can actually use the model of story-based inquiry to find out what really is happening under the hood, right? So question for all of you is, if this was a statement that you were working with, that you heard from somebody in the field, can you think of additional questions you might want to investigate in order to get to the bottom of what really is going on? What would be some additional questions you would like to get answers on based on this statement that would help you understand more about what's happening in the field? What would be some additional questions that you ask? Think about this being a statement from, let's say, somebody in Kampala. And now that we know that we're looking for underlying factors to really get to the truth of what's going on, what would be some additional questions that you ask? Yes, Samuel?
Yes, I want to know, how does corruption happen in the school system?
Okay.
Like what forms of corruption are there?
What forms of corruption? How much corruption?
And, how much corruption? And yeah, what are we losing? What is happening exactly?
Okay, fair enough. What exactly is happening there? How is it happening? Fair enough. Anyone else? What questions would you like to ask?
I'd ask questions around how deep it is. Is it something that can still be nipped in the bud, or is it something that's deeply entrenched in the entire system that would probably need a full overhaul or something like that? So I'd want to know how deep it is, how far it has gone, and then be able to craft a solution around that.
Fair enough. So looking at how deep is it, can you still nip it in the bud, or has it really spread to a point where we need to be more creative about the solutions that we are designing? Fair enough. So you would want to know more about the nature and the depth of corruption that's out there. Thank you, Juliet. Yes, Paul?
Now to go into why are they doing it? What is driving this corruption to be in the schools?
Right. Fair enough. Why are they doing it? You want to get to the cause behind it? Fair. All right. Let me show you how you would actually be able to deconstruct this to find out so much more about the problem and what's really going on. That is going to help you get a better understanding. So first of all, the first thing to do is if you look at a statement like this, and you can apply this to your startups and your companies and your problem statements as well, is to look at what the keywords here. So there are a couple of keywords to look out for. So first of all, there is corruption, there is school system, there is parents, and then there's children, and then there's also better lives, right? You want to get to the depth and have a better understanding for each of these. So if I were to deconstruct this statement, I would go to the depth of asking questions like, for example, for corruption, what exactly do you mean by corruption? What kind of corruption? It's bribes, favoritism, nepotism. How does corruption work in schools versus corruption, for example, in other places, right? School system, what kind of schools? Does corruption work the same way in all the schools, or does it work different way in different schools, right? What rules are there to prevent corruption in the first place? Why are those rules not working? Who are the different stakeholders involved in corruption? Let's look at parents. Which parents have experienced corruption? All parents, some parents, right? Why did they think that education would actually help them achieve these dreams? What is the parents' experience? You can literally make a user journey for parents to look at what corruption looks like from their perspective. Also for children, right? Are the children aware that corruption is happening? How does it affect them if they're aware? How does this affect, really reflect on their learning journey? And of course, when it comes to leading better lives, what was the definition of better lives in the first place for parents and children? How is the school system supposed to help them achieve that? And why is it not working now that there is corruption? The reason I wanted to show you this is there is just so much to learn about the problems that you're facing if you really start looking at it critically, which is really going to help you get to certain truths and facts and data points, which is going to help you generate and create a much, much better narrative when it comes to whatever storytelling campaigns you're working on, because you will be able to understand all of these different interconnected factors that help that is really happening, behind the scenes when it comes to the problem that you're solving. So you can take a screenshot of this. I just wanted to show you a process of how you deconstruct, uh, you know, problems or statements or insights in order to get down to the get down under the hood to the absolute truth. Now, having said that, I wanted to give you one quick tool. Of course, uh, it's very difficult to talk about everything on this topic in 90 minutes, but I just wanted to do enough to inspire you. I wanted to give you one quick tool, which in my experience, I've found it very, very helpful when it comes to just communicating your idea, right? So the point of storytelling is to communicate your idea in the most efficient way out there possible so that it takes the least amount of time for people to understand what it is that you're building. Now, one way to do that is to use something called an X for Y analogy, right? And I'm going to show you what that means. I want to show you this using an example from a project that I spoke about earlier that we worked on. So you remember when I mentioned that we worked on this project where we were trying to address the problem of malaria mortality rate in Mozambique, which is very, very high in this particular region. So these pictures that you see, by the way, the picture on the left is our team on the ground. That tree was the clinic where a doctor would visit once every 2 to 3 weeks. And if you had symptoms of any disease, you would line up in front of that tree. The doctor would see you. That hut you see in the background was the checkup room where you were taken if you needed to undergo a checkup. And of course, what we were trying to understand is how do we really build a solution around the problem of the fact that the malaria mortality rate was so high. And when we investigated, we found out a lot of different interconnected problems, right? For example, we found out that pregnant women are more at risk of malaria. Why? Again, societal structure did not allow them to step out of the house during the 9 months of pregnancy. So the women were not even coming to the street, right? They were not even meeting the doctors. So there was no data about women having malaria. And also pregnant women with malaria, it's a little bit more dangerous because malaria can be passed on from the mother to the newborn child, right? So there are two lives at risk when it comes to pregnant women having malaria. Also, we found that there was a lot of other issues around lack of knowledge around prevention techniques. There was lack of healthcare infrastructure, very few doctors in that region. And plus, the main problem that we found was that doctors just did not have enough data to realize which village should they visit in terms of the most critical cases, right? So they just had a round robin based, strategy where they would just go to village A and then village B and then village C and then come back to village A after 2 weeks and then again village B and again village C. But they had no way of making a decision where, where they could make the choice of going to village C instead of village B, because they had data that there are critical cases of malaria in village C. So that village needs more attention this week and you can go back to village B a week later. So there was lack of data. So what we ended up doing is we created this system where if you had symptoms of malaria, you could give missed call to a number and a community healthcare worker would visit your home, take your readings, put it on a central database. And now a doctor could look at a map of where the most critical cases of malaria are and make a decision of going there. So what we did is we could not create more doctors, but we ended up creating a system where the available doctors and healthcare professionals could just make better decisions, right? On the basis of data. And we created a system to collect that real-time data of where the malaria cases were. Now, because it was a system that used phones where you gave a missed call and a community healthcare worker would come to your house, they were trained by us. So they could take your readings and put it in a central database so that now healthcare professionals could see where the cases are. We ended up explaining our idea to other people as we are creating an Uber for malaria testing, right? Very simple to understand, right? So when we started saying that we are creating a solution which is basically Uber for malaria testing, that immediately got people to understand what it is that we're doing. So they were like, okay, so you're using phones to book on-demand malaria testing so that somebody can come to your home and do it for you. It's very, very easy to communicate an idea when you take something that people already know and then apply it to the problem that you're trying to solve, right? So essentially, you can use this model for other stuff as well. For example, YouTube could be Flickr for videos. Glassdoor, which is a company where you can look at. It's a company that has a product where you can look at jobs, but what they do is they show you recruiters and they give you ratings and feedbacks and reviews, and you can then see whether it's a recruiter worth working for. So Glassdoor is like TripAdvisor for jobs, or like Baidu, which is the search engine that is used in China, is like Google for China, right? Even if you knew nothing about what Baidu is, but if I told you that Baidu is Google for China, you would immediately understand what it does. I don't need to show you a 10-minute presentation or a pitch deck on Baidu. You immediately know what they do because you're able to combine that. So essentially what I'm trying to say is the best way to do this is to understand the problem you're solving and then take an application or just a solution in a different domain that everyone knows about, that your audience knows about, and then you can create an X for Y analogy, right? So this could be anything from creating, for example, Tinder for fintech investments. It could be Netflix for healthcare content, right? Disneyland for cancer patients who are children, right? It's very easy for you to understand some of these things because it's just so intuitive. So one of the best tools that I've found in storytelling, just something to communicate your idea better, is the X for Y analogy, which always works and is just a very efficient way to get what you're communicating out there in the world. I want to stop right there, right? Because we are running out of time. But of course, I'm going to still hang out for a few minutes more if you have any questions. I hope you found that worth it. My goal for this particular session was to really inspire you to think of storytelling and to think of narratives in a very different way from what's spoken out there in the world, because there's just so much focus on how to design an advertising campaign and how to have a content strategy for your website. But there's so little spoken about the foundations of what makes a good narrative or what really propels people to take action or understand what you're trying to say, that I feel that there should be more conversations around it. So yeah, that is what I had for you guys. Thank you so much. I know that we would have loved to have more time for us to do this, but I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm still here for a few minutes. Thank you so much, guys. Any questions, any thoughts, any comments?
Anyone
Yes,
with a
Paul.
question? Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Sonia, and then we'll do Paul. Yes, sir.
I have a small question.
Yes.
Like how would you phrase a very compelling fast introduction when you're given like 3 minutes and you have
Right.
to, you know, to make it so compelling for this investor to hop on to, you know, your project to
Right.
help you get
So-
funded? How would you make it so simple, so easy in 3 minutes?
Right.
Like
So,
if you
Munia,
can give an example of your own
sure, I can do that.
project.
So I'll give you an example, Munyasa, which is when we were talking to Mastercard Foundation about this particular malaria project. By the way, the project that we ended up creating was a company called Ola Health. Ola is Portuguese for hello because Ola is the language spoken in Mozambique, right? So when we had to pitch Ola Health and we had very little time, just like you, right? We literally had time for an elevator pitch. So we actually used the X for Y analogy, the high level concept, right? So we started out by telling our investors when we met them in the hallway of the office building, we were like, we are building an Uber for malaria testing in Mozambique, right? And they were like, oh, they immediately understood what we were talking about, right? They didn't need a pitch deck. They were like, oh, okay, so you're doing something with phones and you're making on-demand malaria testing. So it was very easy for them to get that. What I would recommend next, Munyasa, especially if you're pitching and you have 3 minutes, is always start out with the problem that you are, that you are addressing, because everyone, including investors, first relate with the problem before they understand your solution. So if you start out with a problem, that's a great way for your investors also to see your understanding of what it is that you're solving and then to see how your solution fits into that problem. So just tips I have for you out there is to start with that high level concept and X4 analogy, create that for your company, right? Just an easy way for people to immediately understand what you're talking about. So whatever it is that you're building, and you can do this exercise internally as well, but an X for Y, like an Uber for malaria testing, right? A Tinder for student founders, to get investments, stuff like that. So just a very easy for them to understand. And then, of course, in your pitch deck, very important to always start with the problem before you get to the details of your solution. I hope that helps. All right, perfect. Paul.
That is well understood. Thank you.
Absolutely. Paul, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Rohaan. Very informative and rich. Already taking the notes and knowing the action points. Now, on that, like the way we said, we problem, then the solution. But then the solution has two aspects. It has the aspect of X for Y, maybe like agri share, we are more like Uber but for farmers, or B&B for farmers. Then there is also this aspect where the real solution now comes in the description. Yeah. What X for Y comes first after description or the latter? Why is it so? Sometimes sometimes you share about I can share about agri share. Then somebody will just conclude, it's Uber for farmers. It's a B&B for farmers. Then other time I feel like, but if you say Uber for farmers, would it bring out the innovativeness? Want it to say, they're just duplicating what is already existing? Thank you.
Got it. So, Paul, thank you for asking that question. The way to look at it is that you make these decisions on the basis of how much time do you have and what the context is, right? So, if you only have a minute to talk about AgriShare, right? And let's say that it's just enough time for an elevator pitch. Going with the route of an Uber for farmers is better because it conveys a lot in very little time, right? And then, of course, it grabs the interest to have a second conversation where you can actually show your pitch deck and you can show what problem you're solving. You can show about what the innovation is that you're bringing, how the product market fit is happening in the sense of your understanding of the demand, which is the problem, and your users, and your understanding of the supply side, which is your solution and the technology and the innovation, how they come together. That is a second degree conversation that needs more time, right? And it also needs the right context. You can't show your pitch deck to someone who doesn't want to see your pitch deck, right? That's usually a second degree conversation. So essentially what I'm trying to say, Paul, is that using the X for Y analogy is great when you have little time and you want to immediately grab attention. And then you can do the other stuff where you talk about the innovation and the problem that you're addressing, the interconnected problems. You use all of that when you have more time, right? So it's just understanding where what fits in, and it's always a function of time and context. That makes sense. Yeah. All right. Perfect. Any other questions? Sachin, I saw your hand. Did you want to ask something?
Yeah, actually, thank you so much, Rohan. Very informative session, very thought-provoking. My problem had always been about, conveying the idea in shortest possible of time to the
Right.
investors, because
Right.
I'm already speaking with the investors, like my fellow entrepreneurs. And
Right.
that had been the challenge. And every time we have to kind of, change the way we are communicating the story also as per the investors' mandate. That is also the
Correct.
biggest problem which I found out,
Correct.
because somebody
Correct.
would be, because you try to solve the problem, sometimes there is no analogy for agriculture kind of a business. Only
Correct.
analogy is something which is in developing countries like India, where some are
Yeah.
really doing. And so we are trying to find that balance. And thank you so much for very informative session, actually.
Absolutely. So, Sachin, just a quick, just so that you don't feel alone in this process, right? So, I have been a part of fundraising processes multiple times. And just something that every founder does is that I do it as well, is that we always have 5 different versions of our pitch decks, right? Because we are constantly talking to 5 different types of investors or 5 different types of audience. So some pitch
Right.
decks are a product pitch deck, which has a lot of information on technology, on just architecture, infrastructure, all of that kind of stuff. Then there are very generic pitch decks, which gives you an overview of the problem you're solving and the solution that you're designing, right? Then there are pitch decks
Right.
which are very market and business focused, right? Which is mainly for investors that do not have a tech background, but really want to see other things like what's your business model, how are you planning to make revenue, what is your 5-year projection and stuff like that. So having different pitch decks is just a practice that all of us do. So you're not the only one such in struggling with that. All of us do it, right? And it's very
Yeah.
normal for you to be able to do that. What is important to understand, Sachin, is that there is always an underlying narrative that connects all of those 5 pitch decks together. That doesn't change, right?
Correct.
So once you're able to nail down how exactly to have, how exactly to best communicate your idea, like what is that underlying narrative, which connects all of those different pieces together, it'll be very easy for you to create new versions. Also, a word of advice is that don't just look for analogies within agriculture. So like as Paul was talking about Uber for agriculture, right? Or like, let's say Uber for
Yeah.
pesticides. Let's take that as an example. If I say Uber for pesticides, it makes it sound very simple, right? You're like, oh, okay, so you mean a service where I can use my phone to have on-demand pesticides delivered to my doorstep, right? That is what it makes you think of. So the analogies that you want to use should always be from outside agriculture, really products or services or companies that your audience knows about, like not something that they have to Google for, just something which they intuitively know about. And then you take that
Yeah.
context and you apply it to agriculture. This will never be 100% fit, by the way. Just like Paul said, when you say Uber
Yeah.
for pesticides or Uber for seeds, it doesn't exactly talk about maybe the innovation that Paul is bringing, through his solution, but it at least gets 60% of the message out there to your investors, enough for them to now be interested in looking at a product pitch deck which shows your innovation in action, right?
Correct.
So the analogies are always from outside your sector, which is why it is fun, which is why it is interesting. And then you apply it to your sector in order to create that very interesting, just a very quick 5-second elevator pitch, which immediately grabs, your audience's attention and wants them to learn more about your product, if that makes sense.
Agreed. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Sachin. Any other questions? Anyone? Let me stop sharing my screen. Please keep in touch. By the way, I do a lot of work in Africa and I've traveled across the continent and I keep coming down there. Hopefully, I will be in Uganda soon. I've been talking to Emmanuel and Sonia about that. And if I am, I would be very happy to meet you guys and in person. and learn more about what you're working on. But until then, please keep in touch. Instagram, LinkedIn are the best places to keep in touch with. I do a lot of traveling. Please feel free to just ask me questions there. I would love to just know more about you and your companies. But if there's any last questions or feedback, comments, anything, I would love to take it. Otherwise, we call it a day.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rohan. I think it was really quite insightful. I think I also had a few challenges on my end. At one point, I had a question, then I think my network got off. Yeah, but I think overall, I was also trying to keep in. I think some of the things I had, seen. I think one interesting one again is for the case study you showed of the challenge you are having for a woman with a borehole and then the solution you developed. I think it was very interesting at time. I think I shared with you when I think someone shared that exact picture of the ladies before and then the bore and then the solution they created. And then people were going rampage about it. How like what is the irony about it? Why don't you create infrastructure around it? Why don't you create boreholes? Yeah, and when you had this entire background, you understood the story behind it, why exactly this kind of thing was created. So I think it's really something that founders really need to think about. And then, of course, the last one to me was also looking at how founders can also tell their story, because this is something that I myself would also be curious also to learn. Is as you're pitching or telling any story, you mentioned about starting with a problem, and then you're always looking at, do I just talk about numbers? When I talk about a problem, I want to amplify and say 70% of people face this kind of problem or don't have access to safe water. How do you bring out the story element that people can easily remember a story? Because one thing I saw recently I've been, meditating on is how do you share a story, whether it's a pitch or anything that someone can recall after, because most times if AgroShare is coming to pitch, you're pitching to an investor who listens to 10 of different companies every day. So you want your company to stand out. Do you have any one or two keywords that you would say, for that? How do you make sure that you're standing out anytime you're presenting your business?
Right. So I think, Emmanuel, the trick is in reducing friction, right? So essentially, the problem is that when we are trying to talk about a story out there or have a compelling narrative that people will remember, usually our pitches have so much jargon in it that it creates friction, right? So we use a lot of technical terms. We use generative AI to give you crop predictions, stuff like that, right? That is not something that everyone will understand, by the way, right? Or not understand completely, right? For that matter. So I think the goal is always to reduce friction and to understand that people, and I'm telling you this as a technical founder. I'm an engineer, by the way, right? Let me put it out there. I'm telling you this as a technical founder. I'm telling you this as an engineer, that people understand emotions better than technology, right? So it is more important for you to, whatever hook you're using, are hooks that people relate with, are emotional hooks. It's stuff that people can understand very easily without too much friction, where they don't have to learn a concept to understand what your solution is. Of course, that's a second degree or a third degree conversation, right? Where you have the time and where you have that attention, where you can show a pitch deck which talks about, just like, let's say, how innovative your AI architecture is, that is able to bring down server costs while at the same time offering high quality suggestions and recommendations. Just using RAG models and stuff like that. You can get into all of those details only when you have the right audience, the right time, and the right context. But in order to grab attention and make sure that people remember, nobody remembers technology. People remember emotions, right? There's a very high chance that you will remember that I started this session asking for movie, TV show, and book recommendations and giving the same, than like really remembering some of the concepts, because that is just something that everyone relates with. It has an emotional trigger, right? I did that on purpose, by the way, not because it wasn't fake. I really do enjoy reading books and watching films and TV shows. It is me as a human being, right? And you can relate with that more than like me solving malaria and building like rapid diagnostic systems in Mozambique. That's not as relatable as like me also like loving, like, let's say, spy and science fiction films, and like going around giving out book recommendations, right? So relatability is what you're going for, Emmanuel. And in order to make yourself and your narrative more relatable, you need to reduce friction. And the way to reduce friction is to focus more on uh, just emotional triggers and understanding, what really drives people to take action. And it's never technology. Technology is always a second and a third degree conversation. It's never the first degree conversation. It's not a conversation starter. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm not sharing my screen, right?
Yeah. Yes, you are.
Perfect. Sure.
Yeah. I
All
think
right.
I think as one last question, I saw Julian. Julian, you had your hand up.
Yeah, mine wasn't a question, but I think you've almost said everything. I was just reflecting on this session. I just started pitching about a couple of months back, and I had no idea what a pitch was. I think they threw me in the deep end one time. I enter this room and they tell me you're pitching. I'm like, what do you mean? What is pitching? But over time, I have learned that, and then got into all this coaching. It's something that maybe so shares that sometimes such sessions are very good to just tell us this is how your pitch should look like. But then I realized that after the several pitching sessions that I had, and then there was feedback, I got more and more confused, because then I tried to be perfect. Like I tried to get all these things into one thing to have like the perfect pitch, and it would really mess me up. And I'd go up there and forget certain things, because in my brain I've already put everything in order. And then when I miss this step, I kind of do not know how to move on to the next one. And that was quite like a bit, it was a learning moment for me. But then somehow I remember someone just told me, you know what, go tell your story, be a storyteller. Just go tell your story and take it on from there. And it's funny how you're saying I just grab the person's attention by putting in all these whatever. You can crack a joke, you can just bring a similar story. I mean, Uber for malaria testing, it makes so much sense when you're pitching, because also sometimes when you're pitching, you're saying, and then it's like, what are you talking about? What is mobile money? You're pitching before these people who sit in the US, they do not know what mobile money is or whatever, and then you have to explain. So it's always important to just speak out relatable aspects of something that somebody, and also to put in context a lot of things just to exit. Sometimes it's like explaining something to a toddler, but it actually does work, because then it clicks, the light bulb moment happens, it clicks. So it's also important to know, if possible, who is on that jury, who are you pitching to, what kind of pitches have they had, what kind of companies, what kind of people are they. You go look at their LinkedIn, and then you're able to know how to connect to the people you're pitching to, and it helps to build like a sort of relationship. But it's not an exam, it's not a do or die. I used to take it as a do or die. I would have to go there and do or die. But over time, it's just helped that I realized that they're human beings too. They're human beings too. Some of them have been of this side before, and now they've transitioned to the other side. But it's always important to just know that. And yeah, I want to brag a bit. We recently won the Africa Pitch competition at the Africa FinTech Summit after a whole year of pitching and getting a lot of feedback, getting confused. But yeah, just stick to your story. Your authentic story is always very important. That is what people are looking for. It's what they want to hear. So I like Helen, every time she's giving an example, she's always going back to what she's doing. Like, it's very relatable that she's not just speaking fiction, or she's speaking words out of a book or something. She's actually saying what's happened, what she has experienced. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you very much for this session. I enjoyed the case study.
Thank you so much, Juliet. And of course, I I'll take a minute to just build on what Juliet said. And Juliet, I'm sure you relate to this. Just something I learned from pitching as well is that you have to understand that pitching is never about you. It's about the audience. It's about who you're pitching to, right? Most founders make the mistake of thinking that the pitch is about you, where you have to talk about your product, your service, and why you are the best company on this planet, and why you have the best business model, and why they should invest in you. It's not about you. Pitching is about the people you're pitching to. So what that means is doing some homework, understanding why they are there in the room in the first place, and then tailor making your narrative so that it kind of speaks to them. So something that I've always done in pitches is, for example, if I've been speaking to an investor who I know started out as a founder in the, like, let's say started by building a software company, when I am doing my pitch, even if it's not a software company, I always make sure that I use some examples that they will understand, right? It's about them. It's not about you, right? You tailor make, you change your pitch so that the people you're pitching to are able to relate with what it is that you're saying, number one. And the second thing always, as Juliet said, and that's something that Munyasa does as well, is the trick to being relatability is where you bring your authentic self to the table, right? Nobody likes to see a great pitch deck where people are wondering, but why is Juliet so like passionate about this problem? Like, great, like that was a great pitch, but like, why is Juliet working on this problem? Like, what's in it for her? Like, why Juliet? Nobody wants to end up being in a pitch session where you absolutely cannot comprehend why is the founder so passionate about the solution that they're building, right? So what I'm trying to say is that bring your authentic self, like talk a little bit about why you're in this journey, how you ended up being there in the first place. What did you learn? Just be a little vulnerable, and that's completely okay. Investors love when you talk about the mistakes you made and what you learned from them. I always do that in my pitches, by the way, where I tell them that, by the way, it's very interesting. In the first 6 months of our journey, we tried this strategy, we made some money, but we faced this problem and we got absolutely devastated in 6 months. And here are 3 lessons we learned that we've implemented in our subsequent product iterations, and now we are doing much better. People love vulnerability because it makes you authentic, right? So pitches are not about being perfect, as Juliet said. It's about being authentic, it's about being vulnerable, and it's not about you, it's about the people that you're pitching to. And the goal is to be relatable, and you are relatable when you bring your authentic self. Does that make sense? Perfect. All right. Anything else before we go? Any questions, thoughts, comments? No? Okay. Emmanuel, Sonia,
Yeah.
back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I was also trying to be quite cautious over time. I see we're just 6 minutes past. Yeah, but overall, I want to just still thank you so much for taking off time to share your stories. It's always wonderful to hear from you and the different experiences that you've gone through, seeing how you move from one problem to come to the solution and the stories behind it. I think that's one thing that I'm also getting, is that since the session was about storytelling, people are getting the stories behind the different things you're doing. We're not just understanding the things, but we're understanding the stories behind it, which is really, really nice. Yeah, so thank you so much, Rohaan. And I think all the founders that have been here, we'll be informing you of any updates. We'll share the recording for those that may want to refer to this recording in the future. But also, in case maybe, Rohaan, you have any presentation, any materials you want to share, you can always share with us, and then we'll be able to redistribute to them. And lastly, to the founders, in case you also want to reach out to Rohaan, feel free to reach out to me or Sonia, and then we can get in touch. Other than that, have a good evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Bye. Have a good evening.
Bye.